and welcome to the Laughing Goblins. We're your hosts, Holly
and Bonbon.
On this show, we usually roast literature
and history
and mythology, but today is a special interest episode because we have ADHD and cannot be stopped. Today we'll be talking about the character of Galinda in Wicked Part 1 and Part 2, so spoilers for both of those movies. And now, an important message on what we will be discussing, brought to you by Off-Camera Bonbon.
We will be discussing how Glinda's narcissistic traits make her a bad person, but we should also note that having that narcissistic traits and having narcissistic personality disorder are two separate things and should not be confused with each other. People with narcissistic personality disorder can be good people.
However, I think the tone of this video will be talking about how Galinda is not a good person. So let's talk first about her sense of self-importance. When we first meet Galinda, she arrives to Shiz on a barge painted in her favorite color, pink, on a mountain of luggage. And when she says goodbye to her parents, she's like, I have no idea what they're going to do without me. This is very strange. I don't consider that my parents are unable to survive without me. I think that they'd be unhappy to see me leave, but I think they can survive without me. I'm not the center of their universe. But Galinda does consider herself to be the center of everyone's universe. Another sign of how much importance she places on herself is in how she introduces herself as Galinda Upland of the Upper Uplands. Again, I've never had a not stuck-up person introduce themselves this way. It's not like I go around saying I'm Holly Dermavoy of the Dermavoys.
I didn't know there was a whole royal family for Holly.
There is a whole family, but we can't go into my backstory. It's long and convoluted, and this is not the time.
I just have a collection of ghosts.
I'm willing to accept that as a backstory. She also offers to address Elphaba's whole situation while pointing to all of Elphaba, which is not a nice thing to do. And as Elphaba points out, she doesn't have the skills or knowledge to back up this offer. She also does it in front of a gigantic crowd so that everyone can see how nice she's being. But again, offering to change somebody's physical being to suit your notion of acceptability is not actually a nice action.
No.
And we'll go into Elphaba's self-hatred and her desire to change her green skin in a different video, maybe. We'll see. I have a lot to say about Wicked. She also assumes she will be let into Madame Mortable's seminar on sorcery without any of the skill or talent needed to become a sorceress. And so in this, she also apparently writes an essay to get into this magic seminar. Magic wands, need they have a point? Which honestly doesn't sound like the most substantial essay, and Madame Morable does not seem impressed by it at all. And she's so obsessed with pleasing Madame Morable and getting into Madame Morable's good graces that after Elphaba's magical burst out, when Madame Morable says, come with me, she immediately assumes that Madame Morable is talking to her, even though Madame Morable was very clear not even a minute ago that she had no interest in knowing who Galinda was at all. So she's shown to be a person that always gets her way. There are very few moments that she doesn't get her way. One of them is she doesn't have magic, even though she feels like she should. She's shown in a flashback as a little girl being gifted a magic wand and being very upset that it doesn't work for her. But, I mean, it's implied through most of the narrative that magic is something that you're born with, not something you can earn.
Right.
I say most of the narrative because at the end of the movie, it kind of ruins that, but we'll get there.
We'll get there.
So that's one moment. She's also not allowed into the seminar, despite feeling that she deserves to because she's so good. And again, I want to know what her definition of goodness is because I don't see her do that many good things in both of the movies. There's a combination of like maybe 3 or 4 good things she does.
Yeah, about 4.
And then last but not least, for this part of our narrative, she's also made to room with Elphaba. But her reaction to that is also a sign that she's not a good person.
She immediately space hogs and only offers the smallest part of the room.
She literally forces Elphaba to be like the forgotten person behind what's literally her closet. Like, she basically puts Elphaba into the closet where she can't be seen.
Yeah.
In return for this quote-unquote generosity of, again, putting Elphaba in the back of what is essentially her giant closet of items, she demands that Elphaba get her into Madame Morrible's seminar. Again, this is not a seminar that she's qualified to be a part of, and Elphaba rightfully is sort of like, no.
I don't know you, bitch. Why would I
don't like you, and also, no. This then leads into, what is this feeling? And she says in front of a group of their classmates that these things, and by things she means Elphaba's entire existence, are sent to try us. The crowd then is like, poor Galinda forced to reside with someone so disgustified. We just want to tell you we're all on your side. And I'm like, why though? She's treating this poor person of color like shit for no reason aside from the fact that she is a person of color. And Galinda accidentally volunteered to room with her. Now, do I agree that she shouldn't have been made to room with Elphaba given the circumstances? Yes, but then we wouldn't have a movie. So here we are.
Plot!
Then we turn into what people might list as her doing a good deed, but I would argue it's not a good deed and it's selfishly motivated. So Bach comes up to Galinda during Dancing Through Life and asks her if she'll dance with him just once. He'll be waiting there all night, is what she says. He says. Now, I don't think Galinda needs to dance with Bach. Like, he's not entitled to dance with her.
No.
That's not what I'm arguing here. But she doesn't outright reject him. Instead, what she does is she points to Nessa Rose
and passes the buckle.
But she doesn't just pass the buck along. She says, do you see this tragically beautiful girl alone in her chair? And again, the way that people refer to Nessa Rose as tragically beautiful is ableist, and that's yet another video, maybe someday.
But it's also accurate concerning how she ends up.
Sure.
Just saying.
Sure, apparently Bon Bon has opinions on Nessa Rose. I think Nessa Rose is also a villain. I think the internet agrees with me.
Well, that's why it's beautifully tragic how she ends up.
You mean tragically beautiful?
Tragically beautiful, sorry.
Beautifully tragic is Elphaba.
I forgot.
Unfortunately for her. Sorry. So she says, you see the tragically beautiful girl alone in the chair. It seems so unfair. We should go on a spree, and not she. And then this is the important part. She goes, gee, I know someone who would be my hero if that someone were to go invite her. So she basically tells Bach, you'll get my attention if you go ask out Nessa Rose. And then she says, I love helping others. Was that helping? That doesn't seem like helping for a couple reasons. One, you don't just outright reject the guy. I would just reject him. Be like, I don't want to fucking dance with you. Is it not clear by the fact that I can't remember your name and repeatedly call you Bick that I don't care for who you are
as a person?
As a person.
I don't care to.
And even though she does consider Bick to be her friend because she considers everyone but Elphaba to be her friend.
Yes.
So she doesn't bother to remember his name And she also never talks to him. He's the one that initiates conversation with her. And again, he's not entitled to her time and her interest. I do think he's entitled to some more respect that he doesn't get. Now, Bach then apparently decides to soften the blow with Nessarose, and he's completely at fault for this. But Nessarose tells Galinda that he told her he was too shy to ask, but Galinda then emboldened him, and that she wishes she could repay Galinda, because Nessa does see this as kind, but she doesn't hear the way that Galinda phrased it, and also doesn't realize that Bach has a big, big unrequited crush on Glinda. And again, if these people just communicated a little more.
All characters, all history needs therapy.
I know, but also there's some power dynamic between Bach and Nessa that
True.
If we ever
She's
do a video
of a governor. So.
The governor of his
land.
city-state. I don't know how the geopolitics of Oz work out, because there are governors, but there's also the wizard, and there was an Ozma, but Ozma is supposed to canonically come after Dorothy.
And there's a royal family.
But they're the Winkies. Anyways.
Yeah.
Totally different video.
Totally, yes.
Elphaba does know that she can do something nice for Galinda. But before she gets a chance to do that, Galinda does something actively mean to Elphaba. And this is not even regarding the part where when they're in the lecture with Dr. Dillman, she refers to Elphaba as an artichoke. Again, an esteemed artichoke because she's angry. Again, she's objectifying Elphaba in that moment. It's also not talking about the entire song, What Is This Feeling, where Galinda repeatedly pushes Elphaba out of her way and, says bad things about her and has the entire school on her side.
True. And they all loathe her equally.
As equally as Galinda, because if Galinda decides that somebody should be loathed, everyone's just going to go with it for some reason.
Well, they're all her flying monkeys.
Explain the flying monkeys thing, friend.
No.
Yes.
No.
Do it.
No.
Do it! Okay, while Bon is looking that up, I'm going into the mean thing that Galinda does. So, she is getting ready for the dance with characters who don't actually introduce themselves in the movie except for in a deleted scene, but the internet tells me are named Fanny and Chen Chen. And as she's getting ready with Fanny and Chen Chen, one of them pulls what they deem to be a hideous hat from her luggage. Now, there are arguments that Galinda doesn't actually consider this hat hideous, because if she really did, why does she still have it? But
because her grandma made it.
I think she's just, hasn't gotten around to it. She has so much shit. She probably just forgot it was there. And they're like, you should give it away. And she's like, there's nobody I hate enough to do that. And they're like, girl, yes, there is. And she goes, oh. And then she smiles because she thinks it's a great idea to set up her roommate for public humiliation. Again, I just can't see how this girl is a nice person. This is giving the Mean Girls and Legally Blonde telling Elle that it is a costume party and nobody else is in costume.
Right.
So in What Is This Feeling, Galinda opens the song by writing to her parents that Elphaba is unusually and exceedingly peculiar and altogether quite impossible to describe. And Elphaba responds by just saying she's blonde. Which, again, if you've ever been a victim of a certain kind of pretty popular girl, it makes complete sense. Does it not, Bon Bon?
Yeah. Although my bullies were not blonde, so.
No, but a lot of times when there's the popular snobby
pretty girl
in movies, they're portrayed as blonde.
They are.
Regina George in Mean Girls.
Yeah.
And people assume that Elle Woods in Legally Blonde is going to be like that
But she's not.
But she's not. And that's why she's breaking stereotypical modes.
Yeah.
An entirely different video.
Flying monkeys are people who do things on behest of narcissists. So they tend to keep the distorted reality going. They spread lies and gossip for the narcissist. They can be used as weapons to attack the target or control a target. They are enablers of their abusive behaviors. So they enforce the bad behaviors of a narcissist.
So basically, Fanny and Chen Chen and the rest of the unnamed chorus are like flying monkeys, akin to Regina George's two hench people in Mean Girls. And she's like, I can't do that. And they're like, but you should. So they're definitely flying monkeys, as you described them, in the way that they encourage her to do bad things.
And enable her bad behavior.
Like carrying her away when she feels faint because she didn't get her way, or supporting her when she says rude things about Elphaba or to Dr. Dillamond. There are many other examples, but our focus is not Fanny and Chen Chen. It is Galinda, who then goes to the Ozdus with Fiyero. And let's go back a little. We'll do episodes on all the characters. If you like, comment, and subscribe, and hopefully join our Patreon. We would like to make money someday.
One day.
Again, thank you to our one patron. We still love you.
We do.
That was not Galinda, even though Galinda set the wheel in motion.
Indeed. He did have an out when Nessa was like, oh, you only invited me out of pity.
And he once again...
Double down.
That was on him. That was not on Galinda. But again, she does point him in that direction like a loose cannon.
Yeah.
So Nessa basically says that she wishes she could do something to repay Galinda for her kindness in sending Bach her way. So after being encouraged by Fanny and Chen Chen, Galinda gives the hat to Elphaba and invites her to dance. Then, and this is important sequence of events here, whole gang gets to the Ozdus ballroom sans Elphaba. Everyone starts to dance. They're having a good time. Madame Marble shows up and goes up to Galinda, gives her the training wand, tells her that Elphaba basically said, if you don't let Galinda into this sorcery seminar, I'm out, y'all. And she didn't want that, so she caved and let Galinda join despite her objections, and then said that Elphaba was on her way here. And at that point, Galinda realizes that she has done something horrible. She has set up somebody who just gave her her dream for public humiliation. Now, I think this is important that she realizes that it was a horrible thing to do this after Madame Morrible gives her what she wants. Because it kind of implies that she only feels bad because she's finally gotten what she's wanted. Up to a point. We'll get there. So Elphaba comes, everyone's pointing, everyone's laughing. Elphaba starts dancing on her own. Galinda goes to join her. And then Galinda does one of the few actually nice things she does in the entire franchise. When Fanny and Chen Chen tell her to stop, she doesn't stop. She keeps dancing. She's there in solidarity with this poor woman that she has ostracized and set up for public humiliation. And she keeps going until other people join in to dance with them. But again, that sequence of events, I think, is important. I do think it's notable that she kept dancing with Elphaba after her croonies said stop.
Yeah.
Like, That's the nice part, not the dancing with her. Because again, I feel like that was motivated by feeling bad for setting her up for public humiliation in the first place. And now, my friends, we have reached that most dire of nice things. The makeover scene.
Dun-dun-dun-dun.
So Galinda starts the song Popular with, whenever I see someone less fortunate than I, and let's face it, who isn't less fortunate than I? Which means that she sees basically everyone as lesser than her. I also want to take a brief pause from lyric analysis to talk about the trend of giving makeovers. So usually if you don't fit in for some reason, maybe it's your curly hair, maybe it's the color of your skin, freckles, braces, glasses, acne, pick some object that you can't change, but that people laugh at you about. There's like an obsession with giving you a makeover to fix it.
Up.
I can't count the number of times that people straightened my hair. Like like people were like, "Oh, your hair would look so nice straight," and then they'd take like 2 hours to straighten it. Joke's on them, my hair did not keep straightened. I also just am not a huge fan of like being caked up in makeup and being told I look great. Like, I like wearing makeup. You know this. I own a lot of makeup, but I hate when somebody else is like, you know what would make you look so much better? All of the makeup. Like, there's a different tone there.
Yeah. It's also a way to assimilate and to make people basically lose their individuality. People are starting to look more and more the same.
Yeah. So it is important to note that in the stage version of Wicked the Musical during Popular, Elphaba has just a plain braid. Her hair is like a little textured, but it's mostly straight hair. It's not in the micro braids that it is in the film. So Galinda does take it out of its one primary braid and then like brushes it to like smooth it out and even it out. And so then when she does like the toss, it's a little more significant because her hair has been tied back the entire first act. Whereas the Elphaba in the movie has her micro braids, and they're kind of a mixture of up and down, but Elphaba still takes them down to a certain extent. I do appreciate, though, that they didn't have her undo all of those glorious micro braids and try and straighten her hair. Small mercies. Back to lyric analysis. After she says, let's face it, who isn't less fortunate than I, she says a few other things, and then she says, and even in your case, though it's the toughest case I've yet to face. Girl.
Because she's green.
This is not a murder mystery. This is not something you can solve. This is somebody's skin. Like, this is somebody's person. It's not even a problem. I mean, Elphaba believes it's a problem, but she was raised by an abusive shitbag and a very loving bear. And I feel like the bear tried to tell her it wasn't a problem, but the abusive shitbag kept drowning her out. We could do a whole video on that, but we're not going to because the focus is Galinda.
Yes. There are a lot of outside factors to Elphaba's complex, but we're not going to go into that either.
Not yet.
No.
I think I will mention, but like...
No. Back to Galinda.
Okay, back to Galinda. So then she's like, if you listen to me, you will be popular. And proceeds to fluff around with Elphaba's generalness. And eventually just is like, you know what? You'll keep this dress. Like, she doesn't actually do much in the makeover scene, ultimately. She just kind of puts a flower in Elphaba's hair, and that's about it.
Yeah. She does do an attempt to do magic, but she doesn't have magic. Even with the wand.
Even with the wand, she does not have magic. And then, noticeably, at the end of the song, she says that Elphaba will be popular, just not as popular as her, because nobody can be as important as her. She is the most important person in the story, according to herself.
Yes, which is another trait.
And there's also something very interesting that she says in Popular that we'll get into later. When she talks about the politicians, she says, "Did they have brains of knowledge? Don't make me laugh. They were popular." And this is important because when we get a little into how she feeds into the power structures of Oz, we'll get into her complicity with the wizard and how this phrase explains her mindset, but also the wizard's.
Yes.
And then, I guess, after a weak-ass makeover and not very much of an apology, they're besties now. And Galinda, being Galinda, immediately demands access to all of Elphaba's secrets, of which Elphaba does not have many. But Elphaba does tell her the story of the green bottle that she has been told, and how her mother took milk flour, and that resulted in Nessa Rose being born disabled again. Entirely different video about ableism in Oz. And she basically says that it's her fault that her mother ate the milk flour, because if she hadn't been born green, her mother never would have done that. But Galinda rightfully points out that it wasn't Elphaba's fault. It was the flowers, or even her father's. And that is the second nice thing that Galinda does in this movie.
Yep.
So then we go to Dr. Dillman's class. We watch him be arrested. Only Elphaba really says or does anything about this. Well, she says something. She's not really able to do anything. But nobody else really speaks up. They are perfectly happy with the next person that shows up with the lion in the cage. And Elphaba puts everyone to sleep. She and Fiyero share a moment.
Yes, they share a moment.
Saving the lion. And Galinda is upset because she's like, I woke up and you guys were gone. And Elphaba's like, well, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to make anyone fall asleep. It just kind of happened, and then we just kind of left. And Galinda's basically like, please don't leave me behind, because she can't stand to be left out of things. Even though, again, I'm not entirely sure she would have been all that helpful. She's not very nice to Dr. Dillamond either. In fact, when Dr. Dillamond calls Galinda Glinda, she demands to know why he can't pronuncify her name, and that's the phrasing she uses. And he tells her that he is physiologically incapable of doing so, even though, based on actual goat physiology, he should be able to, but we won't question it. Oz is weird. But she still gets upset when he mispronounces her name. And again, this is before she and Elphaba become friends, but it's yet another sign of her entitlement that she's basically like, this person who physically can't do a thing has to do the thing because I said so. Again, the timeline from Dancing Through Life at the Ozdas and then Popular and After is like really quick. Like they're just suddenly friends. And I know the movie's already long, but I wish they had shown us a little bit more about them becoming friends, because like
it feels too sudden.
It feels sudden and it feels shallow. I feel like Elphaba's biggest problem in her life is she really only has one friend, and that's Galinda. And if she had any other friends, she would have realized that this girl's not the best friend. But
yeah.
Okay. After the lion incident, Elphaba gets invited to the Emerald City, and there's a goodbye party thrown for her by the student populace, who apparently like her now because she's Galinda's friend. And Galinda mentions to Elphaba that she's worried about Fiyero. He's been moody, he's been distant, and worst of all, in her own words, he's been thinking. which again implies that Galinda is smarter than she pretends to be. And when we get into Act 2, we'll talk more about that facade of hers. And so when Fiyero shows up and says goodbye to Elphaba, he says he's happy for her, and Galinda immediately is like, we're both so happy, because she has to be part of the moment. And then as the train is leaving, she gives Elphaba the pamphlet, which is her third nice thing that she does. That's 3 on the actually nice counter.
Woo!
And Elphaba, last second, invites her onto the train, and they head off to the Emerald City. Now, I still have questions about the Emerald City, like why they're okay with Elphaba walking around green when they don't have the green glasses on, but that has not been explained, so I shall
keep that to herself.
Keep that rant to myself for now. But important to note that before they leave and Elphaba's having her moment with Fiyero, Galinda's desperate need to be part of the moment / in everyone's attention happens again. And she basically declares in front of the crowd that in honor of Dr. Dillamond, she will be now known simply as Glinda, not Galinda, which is a superficial act on itself.
Yeah.
And is done way after he got arrested.
True.
And is done again in front of the crowd because she needs to be recognized for how good she is. It's also important to note that immediately after she changes her name, she regrets it.
Yeah.
So they go to Emerald City. They go through one short day. They enter the wizard's domain. They see the giant head. And then the wizard comes out from behind the curtain, thus revealing to them that he is a fraud.
And a man.
And a man.
Not
just
a giant head.
Not a giant floating head, but like just a normal
corporeal
Jeff Goldblum.
Yeah.
So Elphaba casts her spell. The flying monkeys, the actual flying monkeys, happen. And Elphaba grabs the grimoire and runs for it. Madame Morrible sets the flying monkeys after her and tells Galinda to get Elphaba back. Glinda goes chasing after Elphaba, and defying gravity starts. And immediately it's almost the same tone as What Is This Feeling, where they're like yelling at each other. Basically, they're like, Galinda's like, why couldn't you stay calm for once instead of flying off the handle? Which, I will say this, Elphaba doesn't get mad often. In fact, she only gets mad publicly one time in the first movie.
Well, one time as an adult.
Right. And both times she gets mad in the movie, the other time of which is when she's a child. But I'm just talking about things that Glinda would have witnessed. Yeah. So Glinda wasn't there when she got mad as a child, but both of the times she got mad in the movie was in defense of somebody else. So the first time was because those kids were teasing her, but it made Nessa Rose cry and she got upset about that. And then the second time was when Madame Coddle grabbed Nessa Rose's wheelchair, which again is a whole other ableism rant. Hang on. And
the second time as an adult publicly was the arrest.
So 3 times then.
Yeah.
So Madame Coddle grabs Nessa Rose's chair and is dragging Nessa Rose away, even though Nessa Rose is loudly saying, please stop, let go of me. And Elphaba gets upset and Nessa Rose flies into the air. And also, I just want to clarify, when I say gets mad, I am specifically talking about like having a magical outburst in public mad, not just upset, because she does get upset after Dr. Dillamond gets arrested, but she doesn't show magic reaction to it until she's alone with Madame Morrible later. So they're basically yelling at each other. And Elphaba basically, at this point, has had her views of the wizard completely shattered. Her idealized view of the world has been irreparably broken, and she decides she needs to change things. She has to try and change things because the wizard was supposed to be a good person doing things for the citizens of Oz, but he's very much not. He's doing bad things. He's having her read spells she can't understand that then turn innocent monkeys into flying monkeys, and is also, portraying himself as having power when he doesn't actually have power, which she comes to a realization after she reads the Grimoire and he doesn't seem to be able to follow what she's doing. She realizes that he's been faking having magic this whole time. Now he's a very good, street magician. He can do sleight of hand. He can he's a shyster. He can trick people, but he can't do what Elphaba can do. So Elphaba decides to leave, and for 90% of the song, Galinda is with her, physically, at least. Chasing her through hallways, trying to calm her down, trying to talk to her, and then when Elphaba is like, I'm definitely getting out of here, I'm not reconsidering, I can't be part of this system. Galinda, tragically, steps back, and basically all Galinda has ever wanted was recognition and power, and if she leaves, she won't get what she wants, and she knows that. So she takes a step back and she leaves. She lets Elphaba leave without her. The first thing that happens after Elphaba leaves is Galinda finally gets that hug, that acceptance, or so she perceives it to be, from Madame Marble, whose attention and praise she has craved throughout the entirety of this first movie. She also gets led into sort of the inner sanctum of power, which is where Marble and the wizard are. And that's where we will leave us. And we will see you in Act 2. Different outfit, but same discussion on how she's not really a good person, and it's even more prominent in Act 2.
Yes.
Have a nice day.